Hello and welcome to Caesar and Sartre, where two scholars meet or talk at the intersections of their fields, classics and philosophy. It's been a little bit since we did an episode. Our schedules have just kind of been crazy as of late in different ways. But we're back at it, and today we're going to discuss Roman comedy. So yeah, I guess I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's probably worth. It's been so long; it's probably worth giving a brief sort of review. So, last we left off, we had just finished talking about the Greeks um, and their comic tradition, which is sort of where the Romans pick up. The it, it starts sort of with the old comics, who are all they're very bawdy, they're very uh, they have like aggressively meta theatrical comedy, um, especially with people like Aristophanes. Of course, he's got the famous the frogs, where he literally has an agon, a competition between two Euripides and Aeschylus, and has them compete against one another. A little less well known is the older Cratinus, um, and he was probably even more meta theatrical than Aristophanes. Aristophanes, a little bit more interested, I think, in political satire, whereas Cratinus was very big on sort of he liked poetry as itself. He has a uh, lost what's the word? He has a lost comedy uh, called Poutine, the wine flask, where he uh, apparently it's not 100% clear. Again, it's lost, but we have some fragments, and there's jokes about it in Aristophanes because Aristophanes loved to riff on him. He liked to make fun of him for being old and drunk all the time. But it's interesting, I think, to read that in the context of the Dionysia, which of course is the main theatrical competition in Athens, and it's all it's believed to have really started mostly with drunken revelry because that's Dionysus, that's his whole thing, and so it seems as though this play, like he's got um, he is supposed to have been married to personified comedy, which is interesting in all kinds of ways that I don't have time to get into. But he's literally married to comedy, and she is bitching at him about his dalliances, his philandering with mete, drunkenness. And there's all kinds of stuff going on there, but I think maybe the most interesting is sort of the poetic self-presentation. He's deflecting charges from people like Aristophanes, especially, who would contend that he's like an old drunk. He doesn't know what he's doing anymore. We need to let these new younger comics get in and take over the scene. Which, of course, this is all probably largely in good fun. I don't think very much of it was intended to be extremely serious. It just kind of a common theme with ancient poets, much like rap artists today, actually, um, is sort of creating a poetic persona and then engaging in intertextual dialogue and conflict with other people's personas. It's a whole thing. But yeah, and so Aristophanes liked to make fun of him for being old, drunk, and he also made a bunch of jokes about his dick not working, which is great. Phenomenal stuff. Exactly what you would expect from Aristophanes with such material.
Dick
You
jokes
get
never.
into the yeah, yeah. It's true. It's true. They are timeless. There's it's interesting. I think being someone who studies comedy a lot, because like there's there's all sorts of scholarly discussion on why the Greeks and Romans put phalluses everywhere on all everything. Like, it's crazy how many things they had with just giant dicks on them. And I think the conclusion that I've come to is largely that they thought it was funny, like every other society ever. Like, people try to like intellectualize it way too hard, I think. I'm sure there's instances where it's not, but like there's a lot of it where it very clearly is. I mean, they had Priapus, who's like he's the guy that the term priapism comes from. His main thing was having a big dick and getting into trouble because he was horny all the time. Like, it's a whole thing. Like, so
They just all had Oedipus complexes. Freud got this.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like, I think it's really like not that complicated a lot of times. I think it's just sometimes they like it. It's just funny. Penises are very funny. Timeless humor. As you move past people like Aristophanes, I mean, really, Aristophanes kind of he straddles the line. These time periods are not super well defined, even by the ancients. There's some disagreement between them, but we just kind of adopted these terms from Hellenistic scholars. So bear with me. But you get into like the Middle Comedy, which is most of the it's the 4th century basically, until right about the last couple decades of the 4th century. That's sort of where New Comedy picks up. But the 4th century, this is, of course, historically speaking, I think it's relevant to mention that this is right after Sparta has defeated Athens. This is just a couple decades after that. And I think it's probably relevant that political comedy is kind of not as potent throughout. We don't have very much of middle comedy. Actually, I don't think there, aside from the 2 plays by Aristophanes that fall within the time frame, I don't think there's any. We have a lot of fragments here and there, in part thanks to one very interesting little work called the De So. I can never remember how to pronounce it, but it literally means like the dinner sophists, which is a funny title. But this guy named Athenaeus released this. It's a big work where he just talks about how he like writes fake dialogues between sophists who are having dinner together, and we have lots of fragments from him, from like they're quoting like comedians who talk about food at random points. It's so weird. It's very weird work, very strange stuff. But anyway, so that's kind of where we have most of middle comedy preserved. And it's the themes of middle comedy are a little less well defined, probably largely because we don't have it. But we do have a few points. We know that they were getting into what we call the hetaira comedies, which are usually they're comedies that like target a specific hetaira. They're like well respected political courtesans, prostitutes, but they're not like, the term prostitute is not, I don't think really, it doesn't really capture this. We don't have anything like this in our society. Victorian London kind of had some of this going on. There was like, well-known like courtesans who would like follow around aristocrats who oftentimes would just pay them to have them as arm candy. Like, and they're usually very well educated. You don't talk to your wife about politics, especially as an Athenian. You're the Athenian presumption about wives is that they're stupid, basically. They don't know anything, but you somehow we rationalize keeping prostitutes around who are well educated. It's like it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Don't try to understand.
Okay, I was just curious though. Did hetaras have any like political influence then, or?
That's a subject of comedy.
Okay.
There is a whole, going back to probably Cratinus. There is a tradition that suggests that yes, they did. There's at least a couple we know who probably did. Aspasia was a very prominent courtesan around the time of Pericles. And there's a whole debate there about how much influence she had over him. It's really hard to say, right? Like, the feminist in you wants to say, hell yeah, that's awesome. But, like, if you're looking at your sources, it kind of looks like a lot of them are blaming them for all the bad shit that happens. So it's like how much credibility can we ascribe to this? I don't know. There's clearly some belief that they do have influence there. I tend to think it's impossible that some of them couldn't have. Especially somebody like Aspasia, who's just like, I mean, she has like an entire like literary corpus dedicated to her. Not even just in comedy. She's like she's a whole institution unto herself.
Oh, this is just a minor historical anecdote, but I know there was a 17th century French woman named Ninon de L'Enclos, who was a courtesan, who has been called a hetaira before, and she was very well educated, very connected. She had an influence on Moliere and Voltaire and a lot of big names.
Yeah, there's a few women like that from France. I think that makes more sense in the French context. I wish I was speaking to a French audience right now, because this is a much more intelligible thing, I think, from a French perspective. Because there's no such thing as a real marriage in French politics. That's not a thing that exists, okay? Everybody marries for everybody. It's exactly like in Athens. You marry for politics and then you fuck prostitutes. That's great. Awesome. We love that. Okay, the French resisting the encroachment of monogamists. They won't have it.
Our Puritan Anglo-Saxon culture doesn't quite.
Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, no, I mean really though. Like, yeah, it's our culture is heavily influenced by like post-Reformation British conceptions of marital relations. It's basically inextricable. So like our entire vocabulary is kind of inadequate to describe this phenomenon, unfortunately. Which is interesting when you get to Roman comedy. There's a parallel there. We'll get there. But hetaira comedies, again, they tend to focus on like presumably real women who were prominent courtesans in Athens who would like trail around on the arms of various politically relevant men. And these are women who are very well educated. They're doing their thing.
So when
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to ask so many questions.
No, you're good.
Into comedy, then I guess maybe you mentioned this already. So it's for like a comedian in the traditional sense. Would they be grappling with this idea of like, oh, maybe these courtesans shouldn't have influence, or like.
I think that's a bit too. I think that's a bit too pointed. The problem with a lot of attempt to like unravel political comedy in Athens is that very rarely does it have like a specific point that it's apparently trying to make. We have a couple of instances of something like that from Aristophanes. Aristophanes is probably the most political comedian, though. Like, a lot of times it seems like they just drew on political figures because they're well-known people. Athens is not a super huge city. You know any politically relevant individual. Yeah, you can throw them in there. It's kind of like Trump, right? Like, it doesn't really matter what your actual politics of as a person are. Trump is exceedingly funny, and you can kind of just shove him into anything. And they would do that with like all sorts of figures. There's a charge against Aristophanes that he was like an anti-intellectual or something, because he parodied people like, and I think we talked about this last time, but people like people like the philosophers. Yeah, Socrates. Socrates features in that's Clouds, where he He has the thinkery, the frontisterium, which is an awesome term.
Isn't he like
I love it so much.
chandelier in one scene or something? Like he's like,
yes, I believe that is the case. Yeah, and like how serious is it meant to be? Probably not. If you take Plato's, oh, which one is that? Which one? I can't
the
think of the
apology,
name.
or
No, it's not Apology because it's the one where he has like all of the thinkers at dinner.
oh, the symposium.
Yeah, Symposium. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Yes, Plato's Symposium. And like, I mean, he has Aristophanes and Socrates sitting like right across from each other, chatting it up like it's nothing. So I struggle to believe that it's like intended super seriously. There are times again when it there are like serious undertones to it. You get something like Pax, peace, uh, where like I mean, yeah, obviously he wants peace. Um, he uh, or in the Acharnians, which is a slightly sillier take on the same idea, where this guy Dicaiopoulos, Just City is literally his name, and he personally institutes a peace with the Spartans. It's uh, uh, but I think trying to like be super specific and pointed about any political read on most comedy is probably somewhat misguided. Again, not that politics never features nor is ever relevant, but this is a whole thing when you get to Cratinus, especially since his stuff is all fragmentary. But there's he wrote the Dionys Alexandros, which is a play about how Dionysus overtakes the judgment of Paris. Like he dresses up as Paris Alexander and does the judgment instead, and thus causes the Trojan War, which is a very funny concept for a play, especially if you're familiar with Cratinus's sort of comic milieu. Um, but like, there's a whole tradition that actually goes back to ancient times, the Hellenistic period. There is a hypothesis to this play. Hypothesis in this case, not like a scientific one, but a hypothesis in this case is talking about like somebody summarizing the events of the play. And in this hypothesis, this person indicated that there is political satire going on. And since then, scholars have been trying to understand how true that was. Again, Hellenistic scholar, they have a tendency to overanalyze politics into stuff. And the way he describes it is rather weak. He uses terminology that's very unusual for somebody describing that. It's a whole thing. But long and short of it, yeah, like politics is, it's always in the air in comedy, but it's, I don't know if, except with relatively specific things like Aristophanes' ongoing beef with Cleon, who actually sued him in real life. That actually happened. Like, okay, yeah, that probably is a bit more pointed, but most of the time it seems like they like to draw on political figures without making like extremely overtly political statements, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But
I mean, it kind of reminds me of, like South Park nowadays. I mean, some people will attack South Park because they think it has a negative political impact. But like, and I mean, they're kind of libertarian guys, so that's not my favorite brand of politics. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, they're using politics, but at the end of the day, it's like just a silly, wacky adult cartoon.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's a good point, actually. I never really thought about it like that, but that's fair. I'm not a big South Park guy,
everyone,
but
pretty much. So
yeah, no, that's true. That's true. I thought, yeah, South Park is actually a really good. I had never thought about it, but yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah, where it's like
politics plays a role in what they're writing, but it's not the main reason they're
right,
writing.
right,
I mean?
yeah,
Right.
and they're not like beyond doing political critique either. Like it comes up. There was something relatively recent. I can't even remember what it was, but Trump got really mad about it. Um, he got very mad, which like, and I think that's kind of like it feels kind of like how comedy was engaged with, like the political side of comedy was engaged with in Athens as well. More successful people like Pericles tended to avoid engaging with it, even if it seemed like there could be a criticism in there. Whereas you get somebody like Cleon who foolishly decided to step into that arena. He tried to sue Aristophanes for like libel or whatever, and that did not go well. He has not been remembered favorably by history. Like
He still got
you
made
do
fun
a
of.
lot better. You do a lot better to take it in stride. Um, if and I mean really, if you think about it, that's kind of how like Trump was successful at the start. Was that like everybody made fun of him because he is just extremely funny. But like he could take it in stride. He would play up the bit. He'd be like, "Yeah, I'm the silly wacky guy, whatever." And like anymore, as he, sorry, we're gonna get a very political here for a second, but as he acts more and more like a Tim Pot dictator, like he can't do that anymore. And I suspect it's probably because he's getting old, and his brain is melting like a certain other president. But yeah, like he's no longer got that charm. He's no like he's funny still because he's a blithering idiot, but he's not funny like he like used to be. He was still not like particularly bright, but he could play into the bit. He was entertaining. He was fun. And I like like you see a lot of people even on sites more favorable to him who will be like, dude, like, why are you like, it's South Park. Why are you getting mad at this? It's like, South Park is very mean to me, folks. They're always bullying me. They're always saying terrible, mean, nasty things about me. And it's
At
like,
some point, it seemed like he had, he was at least able to maintain a certain sense of humor. Like I just remember, I'll remember random moments from the 2016 Republican debates just because it was like crazy. But I remember Megyn Kelly was like, you've called women fat pigs, and she just lists like all the bad things that he's done, and he just leans to the mic and goes, "Only Rosie O'Donnell." And the crowd, it's so wild.
Funny. Like that was, yeah, like he was so good used to be at, yeah, like he could engage with it without like getting ass mad. Getting ass mad at comedy will never. It just never serves your interests. It always makes you look weak.
Like.
Yeah, it makes you look weak. It makes you look like you can't hold your own in a political arena. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's kind of the easiest way to understand sort of the way in which comedy engaged with politics. And regardless, it doesn't matter for today because as we move past old comedy, that sort of starts to fade. There's still some. It still happens some, but it fades over the years. The only like there's Plato the comic, not Plato the philosopher, who I think does a little bit of this. And then there's this guy named Timocles, who he's kind of like an old comic revivalist, and he's like at the tail end of the middle comic period. Like he seems like he's wanting to go back to the good old days, and he does his diction is very much more like somebody like Aristophanes. It's much more to the liking of Hellenistic scholars who cursed us to have no middle comic scholars. I mean, no middle comic writers, and just Aristophanes through and through. I'm not bitter or anything. But anyway, as you move into the new comic period, sort of from the middle comic period, you see this rising trend in what we call the stock character. People who are less people and more like a trope unto themselves. Sorry?
The bumbling dad or something like that,
Yeah, that's certainly one of them. Yeah,
I think it's more of a contemporary trope, but that's what came to mind.
I mean, there's an extent to it. I feel like that's a little bit more in the there's a few dudes who fit into that kind of trope. Although a lot of the late middle and new comedians, they tend to like old men because they
Okay.
like them to be the good moralizers.
Right.
And especially with somebody like Menander, the new comic guy, he really loves moralizing. That's like he seems to be of the opinion that that's the real purpose of comedy. And like you can read Menander. There's a couple of plays that we have more or less preserved. Um, he's how you say tremendously boring. For lack of better words. I shouldn't say that. I mean, he's known mostly for his very like rich characterization. His characters are they seem very deep. They seem very much like characters that exist off stage. That's probably the main credit people like to attribute to him. But he's not very funny. It's really quite sad.
This
Um,
might be a taste thing. I don't know, but I think I do. I find some artists that when they turn to moralism, they're not always great at
oh, I agree.
well.
Also, like
Mm,
I feel like his moral lessons are always like kind of questionable from the situations that he like. One thing that he really likes, trigger warning in advance, sexual assault. We're getting into that part, but he like he really likes this trope of uh, how you call it, the rape recognition plot,
mm,
where a young woman is raped by a young citizen man, and then by the end of the play, she is like it turns into like a legal marriage, and that's like supposed to be good. I wrote a paper on this last year because Plautus has a very interesting way of engaging with this, I think. But yeah, it's his moral lessons are sometimes highly questionable, so it feels like that doesn't really come through. um, but he's big on the idea of like citizenship, I guess, and what you do as a good Athenian citizen. It's what a lot of scholars call the bourgeois comedy.
yeah.
Um, it's yeah, but other middle comedians or late new comedians of note, I think of Diphilus and Philemon. Um, anyway, and these people all get kind of they get adapted in the Roman comic space. As you move into the Roman era of comedy, um, you uh, important historical things have happened. So like right before and right around the time new comedies evolving in Athens, Athens is completely subjugated. This is like where middle comedy emerges in like the post Spartan defeat, and then Athens during that period like returns to democracy for a while. New comedy is after that. It's the end. Macedon defeats Athens, and there's a whole debate on how that exactly might have played into the development of new comic trends and the sort of end of politics really being a factor in it. And this,
This is where
of
there's a
course,
shift
this is
towards like domestic dramas almost, or
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And that's really the main feature of the new comedy that really distinguishes it above all else from old comedy. Old comedy is, there are domestic features to it, but like it's always like couched in a kind of like there's it's not political in the sense that it's partisan, but it's political in the sense that it's concerned with the affairs of the polis. Um, it's whereas the new comedy is all about the home. and maintaining one's oikos, the domestic comedy. That's all it's about, basically.
It's
And I mean, there's other things going on too, but
it seems to be a shift that had a major effect on just, I guess, art throughout history. I mean,
yeah,
family domestic dramas just seem very commonplace now. I mean, maybe this is old fashioned at this point, but everyone loves Raymond, or like even Modern Family today.
right.
Like people love, like there's a lot of TV shows that focus on a family and the crazy antics of that family.
Yep. No, I agree. And I think that's really a lot of the reason that it gets picked up in the Roman space. While Rome is a republic, it's not a democracy in the way Athens is. And people like to hype up both sides of this. People be like, no, it's just like basically an oligarchy, dude. And then some people be like, well, no, it's basically it's like totally 100% a democracy. It's like it's neither. It's a complicated and unique system that never emerged anywhere else for a lot of reasons. Like nothing like Rome has ever been seen and will ever be seen again, almost certainly. Um,
It had a weird like hybrid model of like democracy,
yeah,
oligarchy, or I don't know how you describe it, but
I tend to think of it. Yeah. It's like a. There's not really a great term to describe it. It's the res publica. It's like wow, there's not really a wonderful term out there for it because it's just like it's such a complicated model of government.
but it's not a
One of these,
collection of Athenian citizens going to the assembly to vote on.
yeah,
whatever
no, it doesn't work like that. It's a representative republic in a way. I don't know. Again, it's so hard to compare it against anything. And this is one of the most complicated things in talking about the legacy of Rome. But um, one of the defining features of sort of this aristocracy democracy hybrid government that the Greeks loved, by the way, Polybius basically said that the reason the Romans conquered Greece was that they managed to hybridize the best features of what Aristotle would call aristocracy and democracy. Um, and I actually quite like that analysis. I think there's something to that. I think I think it's very easy to look at all the different city states scattered around the Mediterranean in a kind of like almost Darwinian sense. Like the reason the Romans really beat Carthage is that Carthage would was notorious for like any time a general lost a battle, they would be removed and often like exiled or whatever. Whereas the Roman system, you had a consul, he's got 1 year to get all of the glory he can. So it just by its nature, it drives you to be kind of a go-getter because dignitas, prestige, effectively, is sort of the driving mechanism behind Roman government. I think if you understand it in that way, that helps to understand everything, all of the machinations of it. Everybody's competing for dignitas. That's really it's these patrician families who are just constantly at one another's throats trying to become the most prestigious, and by allowing them to compete with one another in this way rather than they kind of keep each other in check basically. And one of the ways to get dignitas is through popularity. So it's not like, again, it's not like an oligarchy really where people just like have wealth and they dominate the city scene that way. Being popular is a very important feature of the Roman Republic. So again, I bring all that up just to say that dignitas being such an important like feature, I think would have really like hampered anything like old comedy from taking root there. There would have been a lot of trouble if somebody did something like that, especially when you consider the way that the economics of Roman comedy works, because Roman comedy is put on during big festivals, what we call the circenses, the circuses. The and they're off. It's oftentimes there's a um, in the prologue to one of Terrence's plays, he complains about how a gladiator show stole all of his what would have been his spectators, which is very funny. But regardless, yeah, like you get like it's Roman magistrates who are putting on comedy, and it's mostly for their dignitas. They are concerned with that as usually like a million other things too, and they get some public funding, but especially like as you get later into comedy, a lot of them are also supplementing it with their own funds so they can have an even bigger show, so they can get more dignitas. It's a whole thing. But the point is, you can't really have something like old comedy in that space, because that's just it's troublemaking. It's not when what you want is big entertainment. That's what you're here for. The problem with new comedy is that it's not that entertaining. In comes a guy named Titus Maccius Plautus. Probably not actually his name, because there's been a lot of discussion of this, but it means something. Titus is a name. It's like a real name, but like Richard is too. Okay, the reason I say that is because it sounds like a Roman word for dick. And then Maccius it's a patronymic. The IUS names in Latin are generally patronymic. They refer to somebody's father. Maccus is a character in native Italian drama. So he's like a clown, basically. And then Plautus, it's like I think they're called plati. They're also used in native Italian drama, Italian farce. They're like flat-footed shoes. So he's like flat-foot dick son of a clown, something like that. Like, it's a very improbable name to have actually had. Oh, yeah.
Son of, no, I didn't hear what you said. Son of a what? Son
clown.
of a what? Clown.
Like okay. Maccus. That's the name of the clown in Italian farce. Italian farce is like there's like I forget exactly how many, like 8, I think, something like that. Like stock characters, which fits very well into the new comic milieu. But there's like a set of characters that everybody knows their names because they have the same names every time, and Maccus is the clown. So very unlikely that this is a real name. It's almost certainly a stage name, but we don't have his real name. It's not survived, whatever it was. What we do know about him is that he is not much, but he probably was born in Sarsina, which is in central Italy. If that's the case, he would have spoken Umbrian, not Latin, which is really interesting when you consider the fact that he was probably an actor in Italian farce, which would have been spoken obviously in the Italian language. And then he wrote his comedies in Latin, and he was bringing them from Greek. So he was quadrilingual.
Wow.
Almost certainly, which is very crazy to think about. Yeah, it's very, very wacky, very silly. And you see a lot of like bilingual humor in his comedies as well, which is, I think, quite delightful. But also, it's just like he's got such a verbal mastery, very impressive stuff. And you see,
the kinds of jokes that Roman, like the wordplay, the kinds of jokes Roman elite would.
I don't like the idea that it's actually the elites. I don't think that's for the elites. I mean, I'm sure the elites are picking up on it too, but Greek by this point is a large portion of the Roman Imperium. I don't mean to say empire because that has a slightly different connotation within our context. But yeah, like Rome now by this point has, and it's kind of hard to understand comedy without that historical context, but Rome has subsumed large parts of what would have been Macedon and Greece, and Carthage. And so you get a massive influx of a few things. Greeks, you get a lot of slaves, and you get a lot of prostitutes. These things go together.
I guess what I'm
Um,
asking is, did would his audience have appreciated all of this wordplay, or was it more unique to him? Or
I suspect a lot of them would have.
okay,
He tends not to draw on like super complicated bilingual humor. It
yeah,
exists. There's certainly some that I'm like, I don't know, but like by this point, Greek would not have been a foreign language exactly.
right,
It's very. I think probably the most analogous thing would be like Spanish, in America. Um, maybe that's maybe not a great example. Probably more like French in Britain. I don't
mm,
know. It's hard to find a direct analog for it, but there's like I mean there's Greeks running around everywhere at this point. Like it's not like a few decades prior where like Rome had contact with the Greeks, but they didn't really know what they were. They speak a scary language, like, and they use cases in weird ways, and it's scary, and we don't like that. Like by this point, I mean, certainly the elites would be largely starting to learn Greek, despite the protesting of Cato the Elder, the history's maybe most notorious hater. Um, not even just for Greeks. He hated Greeks. He hated Carthaginians. Like his whole political project was just hating everybody. Really quite amazing stuff. But yeah, he sort of. But yeah, to answer your question, I tend to think a lot of this would have been picked up on by the audience. It's all it's worth remembering that this is all being like acted in real time. Not everyone's going to pick up on every single joke. Scholars
right.
don't pick up on every single joke reading through it in very carefully. Like, and I mean, there's still debates about some things. Like, there's this verb comprimere, which like it can mean rape, and Plautus likes to insert it in random places. Like, they're like, what was it? Like, linguam comprime, which is like, uh, press down your tongue. There's a bit about this in. I want to say that's in the Pointillist, but I could have just made that up. I can't remember. But it's like it's sort of infrequently used to refer to rape. So it's like is he making like a double entendre there on purpose? It's hard to say. We do know that at least in one instance he does use it to mean rape specifically. So it's like but he he does all kinds of weird word plays that like in hearing them immediately, I don't think everybody would have picked up on right away. There's a lot of there's a lot of things that you would have to either see it multiple times or be reading it to really dive into. But of course, I'm
This
not an
raises
ancient Roman, so
this raises an interesting follow up question, I guess, which is like how well, pardon the modern term, but how multicultural, I guess, was Roman comedy? Like, how much were there influences from other cultures and ideas, or were they trying to keep it more pure,
exceedingly,
ex-
exceedingly.
exceedingly multicultural? Okay.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yep. Yeah, I mean, it draws on at least three different cultural spaces. You've got the a lot of it draws on Italian farce, like I was talking about, which is native Southern Italian drama. It's a kind of comedy, but it's not like comedy as it's crystallized with somebody like Plautus. It's like uh, what's the word? It's improv. It's all improv. Like you get two dudes wearing silly masks, and then they like play out a few scenes together, and like that's it. That's what they do. And there's and like they'll make puns at each other. It seems like from what evidence we have, they may have had like very loose scripting for some of it, but the vast majority of it seems to be just like people, they have a scene and they just kind of run with it, very much like a modern improv group. And they wear like very obvious masks that convey to the audience, like, hey, this is what this character is. Kind of like the Commedia dell'arte, if you're familiar with that. Um, but yeah, you get and there's actually kind of I think there's an emergent scholarly thought that hasn't really been explored, but the idea that native Italian drama in the form of the Italian farce may have had something of an influence on what would become the Commedia dell'arte, but I don't know. It's hard to say, and I struggle to believe that that's the case because it doesn't seem like farce survived past the time of more crystallized comedies with people like Plautus. But it's hard to say. I mean, we have a few instances of them getting written down after the fact, in around the 2nd century AD, I want to say. So who's to say? But anyway, yeah, you get Italian farce. Then, of course, there's the Greek space that's influencing it, and then it's also Roman. So they're drawing on all kinds of Roman concepts of the world. Lots of this I think influences a lot of the way Plautus engages with it. You get things that would be perceived very differently in the Greek originals. That's a text. That's a term I don't like, but but in their Greek contexts, I think like references to hetairai, which doesn't make sense to the Roman brain yet, because that's not really a thing in Rome. Prostitution is like it's much more like we think of it in the sort of Anglosphere conception. It's got a very negative connotation to it.
You go to a prostitute on the down low.
Yeah, there's a famous anecdote about Cato. I think this is Cato the Younger. So this is around like Cicero's time, Caesar. But Cato the Younger, he sees a young man like walking out of a brothel, and he tells him, "Hey, good for you. You're not out there hooking up with random chicks. You're, keep you got that il prosene, right? You're keeping you releasing those urges in a controlled manner." Then he sees him again the next day coming out of the same brothel, and he makes he quip about, I didn't say you should move in there or something like that. And this is I think this is a really good way of understanding the sort of Roman aristocracy's understanding of prostitution. It's a not like evil, but it's like a necessary evil, I guess.
It's about just you gotta a good Roman elite wants to control his urges, not be prone to gluttony.
Yeah, it's
hypersexuality,
right.
Or something.
Yeah, and there's nothing like the hetairai in the Roman sphere. They don't really have that. There are free prostitutes, like non-enslaved women who sell their bodies, and then there are there are of course slaves who are also forced into sex work, and it's interesting, I think, because the Plautine corpus kind of deals with this issue in a very what's the word? I don't know. He kind of it mixes all together in his head. Dr. Frankel, one of the late greats in really all of classics, but he has a absolutely monstrous text. The Plautine Elements in Plautus, in German, Plautinicius in Plautus, which is a funny title. But he talks about how Plautus seems to have when he's adapting a Greek play, like he'll just insert bits about like brothels and stuff, regardless of what the context appears to have actually been for the prostitution. There doesn't seem to be a very clear distinction to him, and this is almost certainly because he's working within the Roman space. So yeah, Roman comedy is extremely multicultural. And it engages with multiculturalism in all kinds of interesting ways. There's lots of jokes about Greeks and what they're like. There's like I think there's this one bit in the Curculio where he's like, if there's any of those bookish Greeks in the audience, raise a hand. Like, there's all sorts of silliness regarding that. And there's like, it's interesting because like there's Romans have a particular perception of Greeks, especially at this time. They tend to see them as effeminate. So there's jokes about that, jokes about Greeks not being very having bad sexual mores. Plautus even invents a verb, seemingly, per graikari, to Greek it up, literally, which is phenomenal. I love that word so much. And it makes me happy every time he uses it. But like, it's especially funny when you consider the fact that all of the characters in the plays are Greek. Mm-hmm. All of them, except characters who are explicitly not Greek. Like these are supposed to be in Greek settings. They're in Athens usually. Like, and they'll accuse each other of Greeking it up, or they'll make jabs about how Greeks are. It's like you're all Greek. So there's lots of fascinating meta theatrical play with the cultural distinctions going on. And it gets more complicated when you think about the fact that some of these people probably are Greek themselves, especially in this emergent Roman multicultural space. There's a lot of these actors who are very likely Greek, especially the enslaved ones, just due to where Rome was campaigning at the time. So yeah, that's sort of the Plowtine way of engaging with it, though. He takes these sort of often rather dry, very often moralizing texts, and then he just kind of does whatever he wants to with them. It seems like he kind of has his persona is all about the poetry of pleasure, I guess you could say. He's very he's very happy to shit on moralizing. He usually makes moralizing characters in his plays get their shit rocked. they usually are the ones who get screwed in the end, which we love that. Yeah, he is very much more in the space that you were thinking of, the sort of doddering old men. They'll make bizarre claims. Usually they'll yap all the time, just like about the morals of Rome have fallen apart and everything's going to shit. And then, of course, you get your clever slave characters, which is he existed in the Greek space. Like they oftentimes were the driving actors, but they were not the hero of the plot. The hero was the young man who is trying to usually free an enslaved woman so he can marry her. Which of course is like terribly scandalous in that space. So there's all kinds of stuff going on with that. And this is sort of the way that Plautus engages with it. We don't know a whole lot about the comedians who were contemporary with Plautus. It's this guy called Caecilius, who seems to have been sort of similar, but definitely not as bombastic. Oh, your camera went out.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, okay. He's and he likes to insert like all sorts of things that definitely weren't there, like random mythical references. This is something I've been researching a little bit recently, but he likes to and martial language as well, for these for his clever slave hero characters. He likes to turn them into like triumphal generals and just silliness, just wacky stuff to aggrandize their position, and then he uses like insanely over the top language to do so. There's like in the Mostalaria, which is like, what's that mean? Like the ghost story, basically. It's which is a play where a slave convinces his master that that like a ghost has haunted his house, so his younger master can live it up with his recently purchased girlfriend, which is just a phenomenal like concept for a play. Yeah, but anyway, the slave, he like after he succeeds, he claims to have been like Alexander and Agathocles. Alexander literally being Alexander the Great, Agathocles being like a much less known character to us, but he was like a tyrant in Sicily who did a bunch of successful military campaigns, and he makes this joke about like how he's way better than any of them because he did all of his stuff himself, and and those two had to have like armies behind them. So yeah, that's sort of how Plautus does his thing. Terence, for his part, our other surviving Roman comedian, is he kind of takes the Menandrian approach and amps it up even more. He makes his stuff even less funny and more like like true like domestic drama. Less like Everyone Hates Raymond, more like I don't know. I'm trying to think of a like soap opera almost.
Mm-hmm.
There's jokes in it. Like it's not like there's never humor, but it seems like what humor there was mostly like physical. Like you would there's a what we call a knockabout scene. Usually you take a pimp, somebody who's like a slave merchant, and the leno is the Latin term, and they get the shit beat out of them on stage. That's it. That's the joke because it's funny because nobody likes them.
Right.
That's their whole thing, which is interesting in its own way because that's almost certainly a Plautine innovation. That doesn't seem to have been the case in the Greek space. Plautus has the most famous of his pimps, Ballio, whose name kind of evoked. It sounds both like phallus, which may not have resonated with his audience. That's kind of hard to say. It also sounds like Balneus, a whale, which almost did definitely resonate with his audience. So it's possible that his name means something like whale dick, but it's kind of hard to say. But regardless, he's odious. Like he gets there's an article where he gets called the super pimp. He's just like he's like cracking his whip musically in like a Disney villain sort of like song whenever he comes out onto the stage. Like, and after that, like every pimp in Roman comedy going forward is like odious. And Terence does this weird thing where he like tries to go back and humanize them again. So it's really that I think kind of is his like whole modus operandi. He is very concerned with making all of his characters like very realistic, insofar as he can. Like he still has to operate within sort of the rules that have been established within Roman comedy. So like but they're very like believable people, and that's kind of what he does. He is also seemingly very concerned with the sort of less so moralizing, but it's definitely there. In one of his more famous plays, the Adelphoi Brothers, he has the sort of the what we call the senex durus, the hard old man, the grumpy moralizer. He like the entire play seems to set him up to have a big downfall at the end, like usually happens. and he's been the butt of every joke. And then at the end, he gets this like a big revenge and chastises everyone. It's really and that's kind of his thing, I suppose. He is seemingly concerned with morals. He's concerned with the maintenance of the Roman, now the Domos rather than the Oikos. But yeah, that's sort of his thing. And I think, I used to not appreciate that. This is more an opinion thing. A lot of people don't like him, I think, anymore, but he was hugely influential on Western drama, just massively so. In no small part because his Latin is fairly easy, so he was used as like a all the way through like the early modern period, straight up into like the 19th century. His work was used in Latin textbooks. He was a school book reader, sort of writer. But and so you get a lot of like, especially 19th century, 18th century um, dramatists. I don't know, I couldn't think of that word. Who really draw on his plots. Plautus, for his part, heavily influenced Shakespeare, which, despite the relative lack of volume that seems to have been drawn from his work, I feel like Shakespeare's a pretty good get. The Tempest is, what is it?
I gotta pee.
Oh.
Sorry about that. Or I can just stop recording when I do that, which I probably should be doing.
It's fine.
I'll let you finish up. We should probably end soon because I'm getting picked up by someone in like 15 minutes.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's very hard to find like a unifying theme for Roman comedy because our two comedians who survive are just so very, very different. Um,
Terrence and
Plautus.
Plautus.
Um, yeah, they're such like they're both drawing on the same material theoretically, but they're like there's a little gap in time between them. I think Terrence is born like I can't remember the exact years, and of course we don't have totally exact years, but it's like it's like a decade I think after Plautus dies, and his work is like he's basically one of the last Roman comedians, and Plautus is like one of the very first. He and his work is actually the first, fun fact, Latin literature that we have in complete form at all, which is kind of crazy considering like it's only the second century, I mean BC. Like Romans have been doing things quite long before that, but there's they just didn't write a whole lot of stuff down. Um, a lot of inscriptions and things, but you get people like Plautus and Ennius who are really creating what will become what we think of as Roman literature. Ennius being the main tragedian of the time, who uh, he among other things, he adapted a lot of Euripides, who does feature in at least one Plautus play. Not as a character, unfortunately. I'm sure that would have been terribly funny, but he Plautus makes like a he makes an interesting reference to the Alcmene, Alcmene, it's a lost play of Euripides about the wife of Amphitryon, um, who and the mother of Hercules, of course. Um, but he makes like a passing reference to this play. So there's all sorts of thoughts about like whether Ennius had made a Latin translation of that play. It's hard to say, but yeah, the I guess really the unifying theme of it is how um, different adapters can deal with material in very very different ways. And you see this a lot in like modern renditions of classics too. Like there's a new Odyssey movie coming out, and it looks like the big deal with it is that everybody's making is that it's the first movie ever shot entirely in IMAX. Apparently, I don't know what that really means. I'm sorry, I'm stupid. I don't know anything about that kind of technical stuff in like movies, but I mean, just looking at it, like it looks very dark, which I just which is interesting because there's a lot of the Odyssey itself gets like t- bits and pieces of it get taken and put into different episodics in the ancient world. Like there's a lot of plays about the Odyssey, especially Odyssey Book 9, the sort of which is the Polyphemus sequence, where they get stuck on the island of the Cyclops, and like all of Odysseus's men get eaten, and he tries to make it seem like he's a great guy, but it actually sounds like he's kind of horrible because like he just ran in and decided to like try to demand a gift. It's a whole thing, but like it's but everybody remembers the Nobody uh, bit where he gets by very slightly mispronouncing the Greek word for no one. He creates a name for himself, and then all of the other Cyclopses think that Polyphemus is saying that nobody hurt him, which is very confusing to them. But anyway, that sequence gets adapted in at least two plays. In the Greeks, but the there's a comedy called the Odysseus, which is literally Odysseus's. So there's a thought that maybe the chorus is literally a group of Odysseus's, which is really funny to me, and I hope is true. But and then there's also a Euripides play on the same idea. So it's and I suppose that is really the main unifying theme in Roman comedy is like you can take the same source material and just come up with totally bizarrely different interpretations of it.
Yeah, I mean, writers are good at like borrowing and like drawing their own spin on something, or yeah, it's quite fascinating. I feel bad. I have to cut us short a bit today. Maybe we'll have to do
Okay.
a part 2 on Roman comedy. Uh, there's a lot of material clearly, and it's interesting, and I wish I had more to say about it. But yeah, I don't know if you have any parting thoughts for this episode, but I guess I'll try to have a more consistent schedule in the future. Talked about maybe doing an episode about philosophers and their sex lives. I think that would be fun.
Yes.
Maybe Hannah Arendt is somewhere upcoming as well. We have some ideas for some philosophy of humor. I was hoping to incorporate more philosophy of humor in these comedy episodes, so maybe I should do an episode on philosophy of humor next.
Well, I didn't get super into detail about the modes of humor, so
Right.
we'll but yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Will, for educating us all about Roman comedy. Thank you, dear viewer, for listening or watching, and we will see you next time.
See ya.